The Parashah of Behar talks about Shemitah. Shemitah was the sabbatical, that after 6 years there would be a 7th year release of debts, release of those who had to sell themselves because they were poor to pay off their debts. And the land agriculturally would be left fallow. Now, the fallow land, of course, goes back a long time. The cycle of crops in Europe, the idea that the land needs to have a rest, metaphorically, was very, very important in ancient society. In ancient society, too, they didn't believe in putting debtors into prison. Instead, if they had something to pay off, they would work it off, but living as guests in the house and with the families of those people they owed money to, and there was a limit to the amount of time they were expected to serve to pay off this debt. And so similarly, any debts that an individual entered into, he had to borrow money to support his family or to support his work, that debt too also had a limited time span. The idea of tzmitut, nothing is permanent, there's always an opportunity for change, that one can regenerate and try again, is very important in the Torah. The idea of Shemitah also is important in the sense that we use the term sabbatical, that this was an opportunity for people to study, to devote themselves to spiritual matters and not have to spend all their time worrying about supporting their family and making ends meet. So that even though very soon the idea of the Shemitah, and even more so the idea of the Yovel, that there would be every 49th year an additional year, 2 years off, fell into disuse quite early on. Although we know that when the community switched from being basically an agricultural committee to being a community, to being a more commercial community, that is when Hillel introduced his famous prosbul, which was a vehicle for dealing with long-term financial debts, so as to ensure that people did go on lending money so that the poor and commercial enterprise could function normally. And the prosbul meant that you took your debt and handed it over to the Bet Din, because only personal debts were invalidated in the 7th year, communal debts were transferred to the Bet Din and you could collect afterwards. And you may say, this looks like a fiddle and a way out. And in one way, you could say it was. But the purpose of halakha, very often of Jewish law, was to make life livable in practical terms. And whereas now we would say, well, why don't you just scrap the idea and scrap the law? The rabbis took the view that it was important to keep the law so that we remembered the ideas behind it, even if we had to find ways of getting round it. So the idea of a Shemitah, the idea that we should try to find time to take off from our work over and beyond the Shabbat once a week or the festivals when they crop up, was a very important idea. The idea of lending money as charity, lending money to help people, to support society, was very, very important, and we had to ensure that that carried on, even if, as society changed, it was not always practical to follow what the Torah wanted as an ideal. But it's very important to keep our ideals, to remember these ideals, and that's what Shemitah teaches us, and that's why the idea of a sabbatical is still with us, even in non-Jewish, secular and academic society.